Welcome to the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity Podcast. Join Stewart Heath for down-to-earth conversations with top professionals, entrepreneurs, and leaders who have a story to tell. Let's get rolling.
Hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining another episode of the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity Podcast. We are fortunate today to have Tim Pittman with Elite Abstract be our guest today, and we're going to hear his story about the number of years he's been in business, what he's learned from successes and some challenges throughout his career. Tim, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. We've been talking before the camera got started. We sort of are from some of the same stomping ground. I'm going to call my memoir someday Up, Down, and Up on I-65. And I feel like I should just live in an RV on 65 somewhere because I'm around here. You go wider because you cover more of Tennessee, but all I seem to do is go north and south. Tim, when you think back across your career, are there moments that you would say was a game changer that put you where you are now versus where perhaps maybe you thought you were going earlier in your career?
Yeah, there's obviously several. I'm trying to narrow this down to one. I came out of college with a degree in business, thinking I wanted to be in business, in the banking world, and went into straight commission sales. Don't know why I needed a college degree for that, which I didn't. And that really set me on a trajectory that, I'm glad I did. Eventually, it led to business ownership over the last few decades. But as far as a trajectory and where I came from, corporate America moved me around a lot. And, when I realized that's not what I wanted to do, that's when I began to look more into business ownership and entrepreneurship.
Where did they move you that you didn't really want to be?
Well, the last move was the one I didn't want. When I moved, for a period of time, we lived in Mississippi. And my son at the time was 6 years old when we moved to Mississippi. And in those 6 years, he had lived in 4 states, and Mississippi was going to be the 6th city. So they had moved me from Alabama to North Carolina to Missouri, back to Alabama, and then to Mississippi. And so they were about to move me to, my choices were Wausau, Wisconsin, Yakima, Washington, or Bangor, Maine, none of which appealed to I'm a beach guy. I'm a fanatical scuba diver, so I want to be near the water, and none of those fit the description. And so I knew I needed to get either something different corporate or something where I had more control over where I lived.
Yeah, I was up in Bangor, Maine once on Christmas Eve trying to get back to Nashville before some big snow came, and it's like, what a tiny little place that...
Yeah, here it's beautiful 1 week out of the year.
Right, yeah. That wasn't the week I was there. So, well, thank you. Tim, everybody hits bumps in the road. Maybe it's an illness or maybe you lose a job or whatever. Can you tell us about a bump in the road that you've had in business and how you dealt with it? Did it change your path or just how you managed to get through it?
I've, like most people probably my age in 60s, have had more than one. I was very blessed about 8 years ago to go through what's called a life plan, where you look at your life retrospectively, currently, and where you're headed, and you can see those points, those highs and those lows, and they become very obvious when you spend a few days of really looking into them. One of those low points, I went through a divorce about 20 years ago in 2006. And at the time, I was a business owner, and things, as can happen with that, unraveled quickly. And financially, even though the business had done well, it really set a spiral down. And I actually even wound up having to file bankruptcy coming out of, at that time, what was a fairly successful business. Had to claw and scratch my way back, started another business, and which did real well. one man's pains, another man's pleasures, or one man's benefits, another man's loss sometime. It was in the REO, BPO, bank-owned property world. And if you're in real estate, then you're probably familiar with
Yeah.
what I'm talking about. It was distressed properties. And this was 2008, 2009. So there were plenty of distressed properties. And that really set me on a path back to business success, unfortunately, at the expense of those that now I wasn't benefiting from their distress. It was just the inspections that we were doing
Right.
at the time. And so that would probably be the biggest bump was that, and that time really set me on a spiritual journey. I'd grown up in the church, but it really put me back in a place where I put more priority and more emphasis on those things that were eternal and less on those things that are temporal. So that was probably the biggest bump in my life, because it would have been easy to go back into corporate America coming out of that situation. Then the next probably biggest bump would be when I actually, right before I bought this company, I had that inspection company that I mentioned, decided to get out of that, sold it, had no idea what I was going to do. But I knew I needed to get out of that. So that bump, I won't go into detail there, but that bump was self-inflicted, although it could easily be said that the divorce and the bankruptcy was somewhat self-inflicted too, but there was more than one party involved in those. The last bump was completely of my doing.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I've been through the BK thing too. It's not fun, and had to claw back. And there's nothing that will bring you closer to God than having nothing. So, so I identify with all of that. But been blessed with the success I've had since that point as well. As a CEO, president, owner, how do you tackle learning new things? How do you stay current? If you want to share sources, magazines, books, whatever it is that you feel like you need to stay current on in running your business.
Multifaceted answer. I won't call myself a voracious reader, but I do read a lot, and I read books. I'll read stuff on my phone. I read my Bible on my phone, ironically, but most everything else is books. There's a few things that, to me, I think for me are very important. One is emotional intelligence. And so there have been a few books I've read around the emotional intelligence world that have really impacted me and how I learn and what I want to learn. I do read a lot of periodicals. In the real estate world, it is the real estate space. You can get, for every opinion you have that's one end, like you're looking right now at the state of the industry for the next year. One side says, oh, it's going to be great in 25, and the other side says doomsday. Trying to balance all those, that's where the emotional intelligence comes in, being able to discern, what level of all of that. Networking is another thing that's extremely important to me. I work from home. All of my employees work from home. My wife even works from home. So it would not be difficult at all to isolate, because all of what we do is in front of the computer. There's not a lot of visiting clients or things like that we do. So networking has become extremely important to me. I am a part of several networking organizations that I attend very regularly. I'm on the board of directors for a nonprofit Christian kids camp that I get real involved with. So immersing myself around people in the industry, especially a lot of events and a lot of networking. And, I primarily read two things. It's either spiritual, my Bible, and some type of writers that I might enjoy, like a Tim Keller, or it's a business article, mostly about the industry. So I know that's narrow. I don't do fiction. I don't read that. I don't read very much business type of material that is outside of the space that I'm in, financial markets, or just don't read that. It's either in my wheelhouse, if you will, or it's spiritual. And then the networking part, I would say, is crucial, because that's where I get to practice, if you will, or share. Because when you share the information that you're reading or learning, it really it's easier to remember. It becomes more part of who you are, and not just something you read and go, oh, I read about that, but I don't remember what it said.
Right.
The networking becomes a big part of that.
Yeah. As a young man, I used to poo-poo, I don't want to do networking. And now it's my primary function as the head of my, or, and you know, there's so many different cliche, no man is an island, all the, all this kind of stuff. We're not, we're in this as a community, and without the people that we interface with, we're not going to have much success. But I like the way you said that.
Well, and most of my networking is not, Stuart, is not really revolved around trying to gain new business.
Right.
Most of it is just expanding, my own sphere of influence, if you will, expanding my perspective. Again, my market is so narrow. My only clients are title agencies. So, if the people that I run with, if you will, don't know any title agencies, then they can't really refer business to me. So the networking for me is more about personal growth than it is about trying to grow my business.
Interesting. Tim, let's pivot to personal investing, as we talked about before the show. Part of the prosperity piece of our podcast here. We always find it interesting what successful business people do with their personal investable cash. We're not asking for dollar amounts or even specific stock picks or anything like that. What asset classes do you invest in, or what do you do with your personal investable resources?
Investable resources. I do a lot of traveling with my personal resources. When you say investable, I mentioned earlier that I enjoy scuba diving significantly, so we do several trips of that per year. So, if I didn't do that, I'd probably do a lot more investing, if you will. My wife is an executive, so she is an employee, not a business owner. So, a lot of her stuff is automatically done. So, as a family, that's a part of it. We do have some real estate property that is rental. And then, outside of that, it gets kind of boring, Stuart. It's all back into the company. Recently I've made some new hires. Recently we've made some new software changes. Right now we're in the evaluation process of some additional software programs and processes and materials that would and should help the business become more efficient, become more scalable and growable. So the boring part there is I can't talk about stocks and bonds and mutual funds and commercial real estate or anything. Primarily, it's reinvested into the business to grow the business. Outside of that, the rental property or the other things that we do from a mutual fund standpoint, those were already begun. So we don't do a lot of that outside anymore. It's all mostly, at my age and at my wife's age, we're looking to, well, she's really looking to retire soon. And for me, it would be continue to run the business. So in order to make the business viable for the next decade and beyond and continue to provide for us a very nice income, even when she retires, most of it is reinvested back into business through either people, which is my number one resource, of course, is the human resource. And then in this world of AI, the artificial intelligence, there's a lot of that is starting to infiltrate our business that makes things, especially when it's pretty ours is very labor intensive. We're looking at those efficiencies where it can free up the people. I'm not looking to let anybody go, but it frees them up to do the things that only they can do and not what AI does. So that's where most of my financial investments go. I would say it's probably 80-20 for the income that I make from the business. 80% of it goes back in the business. The other 20 goes into those things like real estate and boring investments.
That is probably the answer that at least half of our entrepreneurs give, and it's almost the most of us entrepreneurs, we like what we do, and we like to control where our money goes, so we invest it back in the business, and that makes a lot of sense. You'll get a return on that
if you believe in it. And you wouldn't be doing it if you didn't believe in it. If you
That's
believe
right. Yeah.
And that's
And you'll get a return on that, yeah, most likely. I was going to ask, and you just touched on it, in your business of doing title searches, how is AI going to impact that? Is it you think it's going to be a similar impact to a lot of other businesses? It'll get to where it can do about maybe 75% of most of it, and then you'll need human intelligence to check it over. And where do you see the AI impact in the next 5 years?
Well, right now, the largest impact where we see it is in the repetitive tasks that take place in what we do. We just to break it down quickly, if we receive an order from a title company, all of that information in the order, if in days past, it would have to be retyped into something else. Well, now, that's obviously, almost like an OCR scraping or something like that, where it just moves that information into somewhere different. Beyond that, then there's what is commonly referred to as rules-based AI, where it's an if-then type of situation. If this order is for Davidson County and it's a commercial order, then it goes to this abstractor. So those are the if-then things. Now, the intuitive stuff that grows and learns, that's really going to be when it gets more into being able to access records, look at those records, and determine if those records are actually applicable to the particular, in this case, the search that you're doing. That's probably where I see it 5 years from now. It's not there now. Nobody's really doing that now. They take simple things. There's a thing called an update, if you will. When a title search is run, if it was ran on January 1st and the property is not closing until February 1st, you would do an update from January 1st to February 1st, make sure nothing took place. That's really where it's being focused right now, because usually nothing happens. If you're buying a property or the seller selling the property, they don't do anything usually in that 30-day period. And every now and then you get somebody that's not smart and they'll go put a loan, mortgage on it or something when they're trying to sell it. But in the case where nothing's happened, AI can easily do that. It can just say, has anything happened in the last 30 days? No. Then that, instead of a person going in and looking at the records, AI can just determine if something has happened, then it stops and sends it to a person. That's down in the nitty gritty. If the 30,000 foot view is more of right now, most of the AI that helps in our industry is, again, the rules based. If then this. The intuitive stuff is where I see it probably going, where when I've got a person right now looking at all of the records and they're determining, does this apply to our property or does it not? That's where the intuitive stuff will start to take place. I don't think 5 years is there now, because I don't know how many counties there are in the country. There's 95 in the state of Tennessee, and every county records their information differently. So somebody writing that program's got to write different programs for every single county in every single state. But there are people, you and I both know, smart enough, they're going to figure out how to do that. And, that may be 10 or 15 years before it's completely intuitive across the country. But I do see that coming. And in that case, yes, it will mean people that are doing things now might not be as many as there are then as there are now.
Interesting. Well, that sort of brings us to the end of our time. Tim, if you were mentoring somebody or somebody just wanted to follow in your footsteps, what piece of advice would you give them?
I mentioned this earlier. The secular part of it would be really learn what emotional intelligence is, the different facets, and the things that I look at. There's 5 pieces of it. Get really good at not only knowing what those 5 areas of being emotionally intelligent. Growing up in the 70s and 80s, the most important thing that we would be taught was education. It was information. It was, get educated, get a degree, or, get a trade or get a skill, get educated. And it was all revolving around IQ. Now, in the world we live in now, where information is so easy to get to, ChatGPT, Google, the internet, information is not, I don't believe, as important in a person's trajectory and where they're going as much as it is being emotionally intelligent, knowing how to use that information, knowing how to deal with people, being self-aware of what you're good at, what you're not good at, and applying that. So that the EQ, is emotional intelligence, to me is becoming so much more important. So it would be focusing on those things, because you can, just like you can't really affect your IQ, but you can educate yourself and become smarter at something. You can also become more emotionally intelligent if you learn to do that. That'd be the secular side. The spiritual side for me is, don't wait so long to realize that it's not all up to you. That it, as the book says, we're just a vapor. So not this too shall pass. Not everything really pretty much nothing is urgent. And almost nothing in business is life or death unless you're a neurosurgeon or something like that. And so don't take things so seriously. You can fail. I mean, I mentioned my bankruptcy. You can fail and come back. I mean, there was a 2-year period that I was technically homeless. I was living with somebody else. I had to live with an elder from church, and then I had to move back in with my mom. And none of those things had to define me. And that too would pass. So from a spiritual standpoint, understand there's something a whole lot bigger than you, and it doesn't have to all depend on you.
I love that. And I can't agree more. It's the emotional intelligence is all about how we relate to other people, those around us, and I like to say, information is getting easier and easier to get to. So I love that. Tim, thank you so much for being here. We do respect that our guests are owners and officers and C-level people, and we know that their time is precious, and so we appreciate you sharing some of yours with us. If anybody wanted to get in touch with you, having watched this, and how would they do that?
Well, I'm on not all of the social medias, but they can contact me through LinkedIn. I'm just Tim Pittman. They can go to my website, and if you can see this, eliteabstract.com, and there's an email they can get through there, and a phone number. So any of those ways. So eliteabstract.com, LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook too. Haven't moved. I never got on TikTok, so I guess that's I'm not gonna have to. Right now, I'm not worried about what happens there.
Right.
But I'd love to hear from anybody on LinkedIn or through my website. They can contact me that way.
Well, we will make sure all those links are in the show notes, make it easy for people to reach out who want to. And thanks again for taking the time and sharing your story and your wisdom. And to our audience, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity podcast. I'm Stewart Heath, and I hope you'll join us for our next episode. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity podcast. If you'd like to be a guest, visit growthgraceprosperity.com/guest. We'd love to hear your story.